Burrow back to throw, steps up in the pocket, gets away from a possible sack, throws, caught. Higgins down the sideline.
Right side.
Short drop, throws it into the back left corner of the end zone. Caught.
NFL better pray the Cincinnati Bengals don't finally put it all together in 2026. Because if they do, the entire conference changes. And I know some people are going to hear that and say, relax, D. This team hasn't even been back to the Super Bowl. That's exactly why they're dangerous. See, there are two types of contenders in the NFL. First type, teams that are just happy to be in the conversation. Second type, teams that know time is running out. And the Bengals, they've entered that second category. This isn't the young Cinderella story no more. This isn't the Joe Burrow shock the league. No, there's expectations, pressure, urgency. And maybe for the first time since Burrow got drafted, the Bengals actually understand what's at stake. Because eventually, the NFL stopped caring about your potential. Eventually, nobody cares how talented you are. Eventually, no one cares about injuries, excuses, bad breaks, or close playoff losses. At some point, you either finish the job or you become another cautionary tale.
I have to finish the story.
And when Orlando Brown Jr. came out and said, it's time for us to get it done, that wasn't just another football quote. That was a warning. Because when veterans start talking like that, when championship players start talking like that, that means the locker room feels the pressure too. And honestly, that pressure might make the Bengals the scariest team in football heading into 2026. Most dangerous teams in football are usually the ones with something to prove. In Cincinnati, they've got everything to prove. Because think about where this franchise has been over the last several years. They already climbed from the bottom of the NFL mountain. Joe Burrow changed the entire culture overnight. Before Burrow arrived, the Bengals were viewed as one of those franchises that just existed. Nobody feared them. Nobody expected championships. Nobody believed they were serious contenders. Then Burrow showed up. And suddenly, Cincinnati became one of the toughest teams in football. They made a Super Bowl. They went into Arrowhead and beat Patrick Mahomes. They became one of the few AFC teams that genuinely believed they could take down Kansas City. But here's the thing nobody wants to admit. The NFL doesn't care what you almost did. It only remembers rings. And over the last couple years, Cincinnati slowly became one of those what-if teams. What if Joe Burrow stayed healthy? What if the defense wasn't terrible? What if the offensive line held up? What if injuries didn't destroy the season? Too many what ifs. And eventually, every great team reaches a crossroad. Either you evolve or you disappear. That's where Cincinnati is right now. Because this roster, this coaching staff, this quarterback, they know they can't keep wasting years. The AFC is too loaded. Patrick Mahomes isn't slowing down. Lamar Jackson isn't slowing down. Josh Allen isn't slowing down. CJ Stroud is finding his way. Window closes fast in this league, and the Bengals know it. That's why this offseason feels different. This wasn't an offseason built around maybe. This was an offseason built around urgency. And honestly, Orlando Brown Jr. told us everything we needed to know. Because when he said there are no excuses, that matters. That really matters. Because excuses have followed this team for years now. Injuries, schedules, defensive struggles, bad luck. And look, some of those excuses were real. Joe Burrow has been hurt a lot. That's a reality. But championship teams eventually get tired of hearing about why things didn't work. At some point, you just want the results. And Orlando Brown sounds like somebody who's tired of hearing about potential. But the scariest thing he said, this quote right here. I've climbed this mountain before. And And this football team is more talented than that football team. Think about how crazy that statement is. He won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs, a Chiefs team with Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, and the head man in charge, Andy Reid. And he's saying this Bengals roster is more talented. They should absolutely terrify the AFC because Orlando Brown isn't some random player talking tough in July. He's been inside championship locker room. He knows what elite teams look like. And if he believes this Bengal roster has more talent than the Super Bowl winning Chiefs roster, that means the expectations inside that building are sky high. Not playoffs, not division titles, Super Bowl. Anything less, failure. Now let's talk about the real reason Cincinnati is terrifying. Joe Burrow. Because I think people forget how dangerous this dude is when he's healthy. The NFL moves fast. People get distracted by the next shiny thing every season. One year it's Lamar, next year it's Herbert, then it's Jay Daniels. But when Joe Burrow is fully healthy and operating at his peak, he is still one of the few quarterbacks in football who can outdo anybody. And I mean anybody. And the craziest part, Burrow doesn't even play superhero football. He doesn't rely on crazy athleticism. He's not running around like Lamar. He's not throwing sidearm lasers like Mahomes. He just destroys teams mentally. That's what makes him different. He's surgical, calm, precise, calculated. And in big moments, he has ice in his veins. There's a reason opposing fan bases get nervous when Cincinnati comes to town, because Burrow believes he can beat anybody. And his teammates believe it too. That confidence changes everything. Here's the bigger issue for the AFC. Burrow might finally have the complete football team around him again. That's the terrifying part. Because in previous years, Burrow had to carry too much. The offensive line struggled, the defense collapsed, the pass rush disappeared. Cincinnati constantly forced Burrow into shootouts. That's exhausting football. And eventually, even elite quarterbacks break down under pressure. But now, the Bengals may have finally found balance. And if Cincinnati becomes balanced, the rest of the AFC has a serious problem. Now, let's keep it real. The Bengals defense has been holding them back for years. Not Burrow, not the receivers, the defense. For the last few seasons, Cincinnati basically asked Joe Burrow to score 30-plus points every game just to survive. And that's just not sustainable. And eventually, it caught up to him. But look at this offseason. They brought in Kyle Duggar, Brian Cook, Boye Mafe, Jonathan Allen, and the big fish, Dexter Lawrence. That's not a front office making small upgrades. That's a front office trying to change the identity of a football team, especially Dexter Lawrence. That move changes everything because playoff football eventually becomes trench warfare. Can you pressure quarterbacks? Can you stop the run? Can you physically dominate games in January? That's why Kansas City keeps winning. That's why the Philadelphia Eagles bully people. That's why Baltimore became dangerous. The Bengals finally seem to understand that. And now, this defense looks built for playoff football. Boye Mafe gives them explosiveness off the edge. Jonathan Allen brings toughness and leadership. Kyle Duggar adds physicality in the secondary. And Dexter Lawrence, he's the type of player offenses have to game plan around. That changes your entire defense overnight. And here's what's scary. The Bengals don't need to become the 2000 Ravens. They just need to be competent. That's it. League average defenses plus Joe Burrow equals contender. A top 12 defense plus Joe Burrow, now you're talking about a Super Bowl favorite. Honestly, desperation might be Cincinnati's greatest weapon this year. because you can feel the urgency around this team. This doesn't feel like a young team happy to compete anymore. This feels like a locker room that understands opportunity disappears quickly. And the NFL history proves this over and over again. Some teams think they're always in a position to have more chances. And suddenly, that window closes. Look what's going on in Buffalo. For years, everybody said they'll get one eventually. Now people are starting to wonder if they missed their chance. Look at San Francisco. Multiple deep playoff runs. Multiple stacked rosters. Still, no ring. That's how brutal this league is. And I think Cincinnati understands they're entering dangerous territories if they don't capitalize soon. Because eventually, the frustration creeps in. Eventually, contracts get expensive. Eventually, the players leave. Eventually, the locker room changes. The Bengals don't want to become another almost dynasty. And that desperation, that urgency, it could become fuel. Because hungry teams play differently. Desperate teams practice differently. Desperate teams attack the season differently. And when you combine desperation with elite talent, that becomes terrifying. Now, let's talk about the AFC, because I really don't think people understand how dangerous Cincinnati could become if everything clicks. Kansas City is still Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes still exists. That automatically makes them one of the teams to beat. Baltimore, still dangerous. Buffalo, they're still dangerous. A couple other teams is on the rise. But Cincinnati might have the highest ceiling outside of Kansas City, seriously. Because unlike some AFC contenders, the Bengals already know that they could beat elite teams. They've done it before. They've beaten Mahomes. They've won huge playoff games. They've handled hostile environments. This team won't be intimidated by anybody. And now if this defense finally holds up its end of the bargain, that changes everything. Because the Bengals are no longer forced into shootouts every week. Now they can control games. Now they can win ugly. Now they can pressure opposing quarterbacks instead of asking Burrow to save them every drive. That balance is what separates contenders from champions. And honestly, they may not be a scarier playoff matchup than a healthy Bengals team with momentum. Nobody wants to see them in January. Nobody. But you got to keep it honest. There's still one massive concern: health. That's the entire conversation. Because when Joe Burrow is unavailable, the Bengals instantly become a different football team. That's not disrespectful. That's just the reality. Joe Burrow is the engine. And unfortunately, injuries have become part of his story. That offensive line has to protect him better. The coaching staff has to be smarter, and Burrow himself has to survive the season. Because if he's healthy, Cincinnati can beat anybody. But if he goes down again, everything changes. That's the pressure hanging on this franchise. That's why this season feels so important, because the roster is already ready for now. The AFC is vulnerable right now. The opportunity is now. And maybe that's what makes this season so fascinating. This year determines how we remember the Bengals era. Seriously. Because if Cincinnati wins the Super Bowl, Joe Burrow becomes immortal in that city. This era becomes legendary. But if they fall short again, the questions get louder. Can Burrow stay healthy? Did they waste the window? Was the Super Bowl run the peak? That's pressure now. No more moral victories. No more celebrate AFC championship appearances. This fan base, they want that Lombardi trophy. And honestly, they should, because the talent is there. The quarterback is there. The weapons are there. And now the defense might finally be there too, which means the excuses are officially gone. This is a proven season for Zach Taylor, for the front office, for the defense, for the offensive line, everybody. Sometimes those are the most dangerous teams in the football. The ones that know failure is no longer acceptable. So yeah, NFL better pay attention to Cincinnati. Because if Joe Burrow stays healthy, this team might become an absolute nightmare. They're more physical, they're more desperate, they're more complete. And maybe for the first time in years, they finally understand what it takes to finish the job. What do you guys think? Will the Bengals finally win the Super Bowl in 2026? Or will this become another heartbreaking what-if story? Leave it in the comments below, guys. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share. Drop your best comments, and they'll go into the next video. To the next one. Peace.